spins a brand new theme. Mrs. Right, that's right.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Mrs. Right podcast with me, Bronte Bennett, author of The Squire and your host for the Mrs. Right podcast. And I am giddy today because I have a very special guest and I've been very excited to talk to him. So I'm very pleased to be able to introduce you to an award-winning author who is also a best-selling author of 7 books, including The Prisoner of Paradise and the recently released The Swordsman of Venice. Now, we're going to learn all about the creativity and the products that Rob has made available for us all to enjoy. But before we do any of that, I always like to know a little bit more about the person behind the book cover. So other than the fact that Rob comes to us from Denver, Colorado today, I know very little. Rob, I would love to welcome you to the Mrs. Right podcast, and I'd love to start with, I guess, your a little origin story maybe. Where did your love of story begin?
Well, Bronte, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be chatting with you like you. I've been giddy and waiting for this as well. So it's an exciting moment here. And so I am in Denver, Colorado currently. I am originally from New York City, which is where I was born and raised, and then moved to LA, Los Angeles, in my 20s, where I lived for quite some time before moving to Colorado. So my love for stories, though, honestly, I cannot remember. I think, like many writers, it was ingrained in me, or I think it's actually innate, to be honest with you. I am one of those people who probably has that innate love for storytelling going all the way back to Neanderthals telling stories by the fire, if Neanderthals did that. But going back through human history, and I actually think that it's one of the things that sets humanity apart, really, from any other species on the planet. I am one of those people who absolutely thinks that other species are incredibly intelligent. I do not believe that we give animals the credit that they are due for their intelligence. But what separates people, in my opinion, from anything else on the planet is stories, storytelling, our love for stories, our gift for listening to stories and being able to tell them. And this is an extremely long-winded answer to your question, but honestly, I've just always loved stories in every format, by the way, whether it is written, comics, TV, movies, stage. I love radio programs as well. I actually really love like those old-timey radio shows, that sort of thing. I think that I get a kick out of those. I am one of those people who just I have, a lot of people have writer's block. I have the opposite, to be honest with you. I have a list of dozens of story ideas, and I don't have the time to be able to put them on paper. So I've just always loved stories, whether consuming them or creating them.
Incredible. And I can relate, by the way, to the opposite of writer's block. I think I've got about half a dozen started manuscripts at any given time. And I'm constantly putting on my iPhone, oh, I've just had another idea for a story. Oh, I've just had another idea for a story. And there isn't enough time. So I hear you. However, I do still get a bit of writer's block when I'm in the middle of a piece. I'll still have a moment when I need to take the dog for a walk or go swimming to give my brain a break and fill that plot hole. When you were a little boy, little Rob, were there any particular authors or books that really captured your imagination?
That's a great question. First of all, I want to just quickly remark on something you just said about taking the dog for a walk or going swimming. I
Yes.
actually also find that walking and water, whether it's in a pool or taking a shower or whatever, is such a stimulant for the mind. It's almost bizarre. But I think it's probably maybe because you're sort of putting your mind at rest, like you were saying, and maybe
Yeah.
The other things are helping your mind reset a little bit. But anyway, same for me. So a lot when I was younger, I've always been fascinated with many, many different genres. So book wise, off the top of my head, I mean, 1984 by George Orwell was very influential for me. This is going to make me sound extremely nerdy, I think, but Fyodor Dostoevsky, honestly. I mean, this is a little later now when I was a little boy, but The Brothers Karamazov has always been one of my favorite books. Going back to younger childhood, things like A Wrinkle in Time, sci-fi books like that were always big for me. Tolkien. Um, I was also really into spy books as well. So I was a big fan of like the Bourne series, Ian Fleming, James Bond books, stuff like that. And I also read a ridiculous number of comics. So I was very into the X-Men, the Avengers, mostly Marvel, but I consumed a ton of stories, and I also consumed a ton of movies and TV. So I think all of that put together really kind of became this gigantic mesh of influence for me.
Mm. So at some point in this timeline, you go from being an avid consumer of the written word, of comics, of picture, of image, and of film, TV, etc., to writing your own stories. Can you remember when that started to happen in earnest?
I can pinpoint it actually quite specifically. So I have been mentioning movies quite a bit, which I am a huge lover of, but I'm also a screenwriter. And the majority of my formal writing education is in screenwriting. So I've written 10 features, 5 shorts. 5 of my features were optioned. Like I said, I used to live in LA, and I was pretty ensconced in that world to a degree. And one of my scripts was optioned by a production company founded by DreamWorks executives, which is pretty exciting. Unfortunately, the movie was never made. And when the rights reverted back to me, I decided to adapt that script into novel form. That was my first book, which was called The Prisoner of Paradise, which
We
you
are now
mentioned.
seeing on screen if you're just listening, The Prisoner of Paradise. Lovely.
And
Really nice looking book.
that's the thing. So that's a dual timeline thriller set in Venice, Italy, in the past and the present. And yeah, so that is actually the point in answer to your question where when I switched. By the way, I do still actually write screenplays, so I haven't stopped that. But the specific moment when I started writing novels in earnest was I could probably even pinpoint the date, though at this point it was probably a good 10 years ago, or maybe 11 or 12, maybe 12 years ago or something like that. I'd have to look at it. But shortly after the rights for that script reverted back to me, and then I decided, okay, what am I going to do with this? And I love the story. I could have and probably did continue to shop the script around, but then really focused on writing the book. And the interesting thing about that is that the intent was always originally for it to be a standalone, one single movie. And then even when I was adapting it into a book, the intent was for it to be a standalone single book. But it organically evolved and grew into so much more while I was writing it. Probably even in the first draft, maybe the second draft, that book had a lot of drafts. I realized that this really could be so much more. And that organically evolved into a trilogy and also a spinoff. And The Swordsman of Venice is a standalone book, but it's a spinoff of that series. And then from there, I got my agent, and then it sort of just snowballed.
As a reader, that there's something very satisfying when you've read a great book about knowing that there's more and that there's another story that has some connection, because I think we feel quite clever when we can see all the connectivity in multiple stories, and we feel as if we're immersed in a time and in a world with people that we've already gotten to know, and we want to know what else is going on there. I am also intrigued. you're a screenwriter, and I don't know much about screenwriting, but I assume that there are some fundamental differences between a piece of screenwriting and a piece of literature for a manuscript for a novel.
Mhm.
So I'm curious about how the skill of screenwriting influences the way you write a novel, I guess.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, Bronte. I liken it to being able to play two different instruments. So, like, let's say the same song with two different instruments. Whereas screenwriting might be the drums, and book writing might be like the organ pipes, pipe organ. In either sense, you're playing the same song, right, on those two different instruments. So the primary difference between the two really is your limited page count. So in screenwriting, the general rule of thumb is one page equals 1 minute of screen time. Okay, so a
Wow.
120 page script would be a 2 hour film. Okay. Now, with books, there are some limitations, especially if you want to be traditionally published. There are accepted ranges of genre. If you have a 400,000 word romance and you want to get an agent, you don't have a chance unless you're a famous person already. And even then, your agent's going to be asking you to split it up into probably 5 or 6 different books. Okay. So you do have those limitations, but they're not really as cut in stone. So like with scripts, I gave that example of 120 pages. If you're writing a spec script, typically 120 actually is going to be on the long side. It does also depend upon genre, but usually your accepted range is within like a page or two, maybe 5 pages, something like that. So it's really, really, really tight. So you need to make sure that you have everything in the page range, that there's no fat on your script whatsoever. Now with books, you have that, but there's a little bit more leeway. But I think having that ability as a screenwriter to make sure that you have like this lean, mean fighting machine, and there's really very, very little fat, if any, and then translating that to a book is going to make it a stronger book and also give your reader a more satisfactory experience, in my opinion. Now, there could also be drawbacks to that, right? Like if you are a novel writer and then you write a script that looks like a novel, that's going to be a problem. And the inverse of that is true. In fact, a lot of people say that my writing is very cinematic, which I take as a compliment. But my very early drafts, my agent said that my writing was like too cinematic, or maybe not cinematic is the right word. They said like it's too much like a script, where I really had to get way more introspective, because that's another area that's very different. In a script, everything that you write needs to be filmable. You cannot put characters' thoughts or inner monologue or introspective unless there's a voiceover or something like that. But of course, with a book, that's a necessity. So things like that. So there are a lot of differences, but there's also a lot of crossover, and a lot of knowing one technique can help inform and improve the other technique.
Absolutely fascinating. And leads me to think that your ability to lead your story with dialogue must be really finely tuned. And the other thing that I'm curious about off the back of this conversation is whether you think it's easier to turn a script into a book or to turn a book into a script.
Another great question. And I've done both twice. So 2 times each
So
way.
you know the answer.
Yeah. And, I'm going to focus on what you said, which is turning into, okay?
Yeah.
The turning into part, it's probably easier to go from book to script, only because it's much faster to write a script. Okay. The number by sheer word count. As a general rule of thumb, your script word count is going to be about the quarter number of pages as a book. Okay. So that's just going to be faster. However, the flip side to that is when going from script to book. Okay. I actually use my scripts when I've done it. I've used my scripts as outlines. So you
Mm.
have like this incredibly fleshed out outline that enabled me to write the first draft of the book really, really fast. Um, and I would recommend that for people, if they're considering adapting their script to a book, use your script as an outline. Also, I think taking a basic screenwriting class for book writers is a really, really useful thing to do. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, because I've gone there too, is with going from book to script. There is this tendency, I think, for a lot of people, and we see this quite a bit in movie adaptations, where the writer or the director, the screenwriter or the director, wants to include as much as possible from the book. Whether it's because they feel compelled to do that, they feel an obligation to do that, they want to service the book, they're a fan of it, I'm sure, or they want to service the fans. But a lot of times, some things just are not filmable, and it could bog down the script.
Yeah, so two things have come out of this conversation for me. The first is that I think I would quite like to do a simple screenwriting course. I think I'd find it fun and interesting, and it might help me a little bit to sketch out my novels, because I don't want to become a screenwriter. I just think it would be a useful skill to develop. And the other is that when I decide that I'm going to try and get my book optioned by Netflix, I'm coming to you to help me with the screenwriting part.
Well, unfortunately, neither you nor I will have a say in that.
No,
But no,
but you live in hope, right?
That's finding twist, yes.
So let's recap. Little Rob had a very eclectic taste in books, loved comics, film and TV, grew up, got into some Dostoevsky, got a bit more of an understanding of the creative art of words and pictures and how you can entertain people with them. All the way through, I'm hearing things about dual timelines and history and heroes and all of the wonderful and magical stuff that we love in story. And you're right, storytelling has been part of our development as a species right from the very, very beginning. And yes, it does set us apart, and it's a wonderful thing. And there are those of us who tell stories and those of us who consume stories, and some do both. And here we find ourselves today talking to grown-up Rob. Although when I say that to people, sometimes they go, well, I don't know if I'm quite there yet.
Yeah.
Adult, yes. Grown-up, maybe not so much. And we know that you've written The Prisoner of Paradise and a number of other books. So I think this is a really good time for us to learn a little bit more about the books that you've written and what we might experience when we read them.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, so as I mentioned, my first book is called The Prisoner of Paradise. And it's the first in a series that's a dual timeline thriller series. And it's about an American couple who travel to Venice, Italy on holiday, on vacation. And the husband comes to believe that his true soulmate is not his wife, but a woman whose soul has been imprisoned in the world's largest oil painting for 450 years. And
oh my God. Got to read this book. I'm already hooked.
Yes, thank you, please. So it's a real painting, painted by a Renaissance master named Jacopo Tintoretto, who is a Venetian master. And this painting is in a place called the Doge's Palace, or the Palazzo Ducale in Italian, which exists as one of the major tourist attractions in Venice. And the painting, still to this day, is the world's largest oil painting and depicts the coronation of Mary in heaven. So it's not just one person in this painting who he believes is his soulmate, but actually hundreds. In real life, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in this painting. And he believes that he has a connection with one. He also recently had a head injury, and his wife, as you would, thinks that he is suffering from a mental breakdown, but he's adamant that this is all real. And through this adventure that he goes on in a series of past life regressions, he discovers that there is this secret society who's been around for hundreds of years that has developed a method of extracting people's souls from their bodies, and then they imprison them in this painting as a purgatory of sorts. So he will then do anything that he can to free his beloved from another life, but this secret society will do anything that they can to stop him, because not only do they want to maintain their secrets and their hold on Venice, but they also claim that releasing one soul will release all of them, and all of these souls are actually evil. So
how on earth do you come up with this idea? This is phenomenal. I need to know, where on earth did that come from?
So the idea, well, I'll get to that in a second. So the book takes place about 75% in the present day and about 25% in the 16th century. And then it expands from there into this trilogy. And then I do have this spin-off called The Swordsman of Venice,
Oh,
which
yes.
this is a proof copy, ignore that band. But The Swordsman of Venice, which is a standalone spinoff. You can read this without reading the other books. This is entirely historical fiction. It's an epic kind of adventure book that's set between the years 1589 and 1614 that actually follows the characters that I was talking about, his past life, but it is entirely standalone. So you can start with this as well. Swordsman of Venice. And that just came out about a week ago. So in answer to your question, how did I come up with this idea? It was actually a blending of two ideas that came to fruition on a trip to Venice. So I've always been fascinated with this idea of soulmates, and not just from like a love aspect, right? But this idea of this intangible connection that people have. And you can have this with a platonic friend. You can even have this with an animal. What is that intangible connection that connects two creatures, let's say, to each other? And different species of animals, you can sometimes see this too, is like the duck that befriends the cow or whatever. But
You see that.
what
Lovely thing. Yeah.
Right. But like with people, like we've all experienced this. Like sometimes it just happens immediately. Like, wow, I really have this connection with this person. So I've always wanted to kind of capture that into a story. I didn't want to write a romance about it. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm not a romance writer. And then also on a trip to Venice, I saw I did see this painting, Paradise or Il Paradiso, but I also saw another painting by Tintoretto called The Crucifixion. And when, there's a million paintings of the crucifixion out there, right? But like 99.99% of them are hyper-focused on Jesus on the cross. Tintoretto's crucifixion is almost like, and it's going back to movies, it's like an establishing shot of a scene in a movie taken from like a drone. So imagine, if you will, you have this camera way in the back that's capturing the entire scene of what's going on. It's a very big painting as well. It's not quite as big as Paradise. And there's probably about 75 or 80 different people in this painting. There's the two other guys on the two other crosses. There's like Roman soldiers. There are like mourners. There's villagers. It's this entire scene. And so when I saw that, I was like fascinated by it, because every single one of these people is and of itself a portrait. That's amazing. Like you can just zoom in on one. You're like, my God, that one alone is incredible, let alone these 80. So, I started to think about this, and like, obviously artists still to this day use models, but what do you do when you have 75 of them? Did he have a line outside his door? And then I saw Paradise, and I learned more about it, and there's like hundreds of people, and it's kind of like a who's who of who was Venice of the time. And basically I married those two ideas of being immortalized in these paintings, because they truly are, right? The same people who lived 500 years ago, you can see exactly what they look like. No film. These people are immortalized now, and they have been on the wall for decades, if not longer. So I married that idea of being immortalized in the work with the idea of soulmates and how you can be connected to someone, in this case, who might be immortalized in the work. And from there, like I said, I originally wrote it as a screenplay. It was supposed to be a single script, but through that adaptation process, it just organically evolved and grew into so much more. So in real life, it turns out that Tintoretto actually painted 2 studies for Paradise. One is in the Louvre in Paris, and one is in a museum in Spain. And so, as you could imagine from that, the trilogy expands out to Spain and France, and I even bring it all the way to China, and back to Venice. So that's that trilogy, and then, like I said, the Swordsman of Venice is focused entirely on. It's almost like a prequel, if you will, but it is a standalone and focused entirely on the past.
I'm absolutely hooked. I don't know
Thanks.
where to start, but I think I might start. I think I might start with The Prisoner of Paradise because I'm just intrigued. But it's good to know that I won't be left alone when I get to the end of that one. Fantastic. What an imagination. And thank you for sharing enough information to really whet the appetite. And certainly you've got me hooked. So you can sign me up as another one of your fans. And I'm quite sure that others...
Thank you for asking.
It's a pleasure. And I'm sure that there'll be plenty of other people who'll be intrigued. And I love the fact that it was inspired by a trip to Venice too. Now, we've talked quite a lot about some of your process and some of the things that you do and that work for you. And as you know, lots of our listeners are aspiring authors or they're relatively new to it, like me. I'm new. And we're always interested in what we can learn from those who have got a few books under their belt and a couple of years of experience. So if I met you at a book fair and I cornered you and said, Rob, I'd love to write a book. I have so many ideas. Where should I begin? How would you advise me?
That's another great question, Bronte. First of all, I do make appearances and go to book fairs and conferences and things like that. I will be teaching a workshop and I'll be on panels at a conference called the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Conference. So if anyone's in Colorado or not in Colorado, that's a great conference to attend. That's the beginning of October. And if hopefully I'll see you there. And if you ask me that
it might be a bit far for me to come.
it's worth it. It's a good trip. Come visit. So, if for people who have a lot of ideas and you haven't started, or let's say maybe you've started a couple and you're not sure which thread you want to pull to continue, my advice would be to think about 2 different things. One is, which story do you find yourself thinking about the most, right? Which one are you most passionate about? A. B is, what do you want to do with it? And from there, you need to ask some sub-questions, okay? If you want to be commercially successful, then you do need to write to market. So what I would recommend doing is take that story that you're passionate about and see if that type of story is selling. And if it's also, and nobody has a crystal ball, but you kind of need to do your best to sort of think, is this going to be selling in a year or 2 or 3 or 4? Okay. What are the trends? And you can see trends. There are a lot of different ways that you can do that to see real trends. And this is what agents do. And this is what publishers do, and why an agent might sign somebody and why then a publisher might acquire a property. So if you want to write commercially, I think that that's really important to look into whether your project is commercially viable. If you don't really necessarily care about that, and a lot of people are like, hey, this is a passion project. I just want to get it out there. Or maybe it's my first one. I want to get it done. I'll care about the commercial viability later on. Then I would say, okay, go with your passion project. And my advice from there would be to expand it out a little bit. If it's just an idea, and this goes back to the screenwriting techniques of how to outline from an idea. What you can do is you take that idea and you can work it into what's called like a premise line or a log line, where it's sort of like this expanded version, what you would see as a description, let's say on Amazon Prime or Netflix, that briefly describes what your project is. Or then you can expand it even to more, into like the little blurb or book description that might exist on Amazon. And from there, you can expand it out to the full plot, the full outline, and then work from there.
Okay, really good advice. And what
Yeah.
about the pitfalls that we need to be aware of? Because I think a lot of us go into this with this sort of lovely, sparkly Disney view of how it's all going to be, and we're going to write this book and it's going to get out there and everybody's going to love it and we're going to be authors and it'll all be fantastic. Before we know it, we'll be on TV and we'll be signing our books in Barnes and Noble or Waterstones, depending on which side of the pond you're on. What are the pitfalls we should be watching out for? The dragons and the sinking sands.
Yeah. Well, I think there's really realities and then there's also pitfalls. So to answer your question about pitfalls, off the top of my head, I would say is time and money. Okay. There are a lot of expenses. Now it's not nearly as much as, let's say, I mean, what people get into when they're starting really can be boiled down to, like, let's say, a professional hobby. Okay.
Yeah, agreed.
And I don't think it's necessarily as expensive as a lot of other hobbies out there, right? Like, I'm in Colorado. Skiing is way more expensive probably than book writing. Um, but there are a lot of expenses associated with it. Even if you go the traditional route, you're going to have expenses associated with it. If you go the self-publishing route, you're going to have more expenses, but of course you can also make more money potentially, depending upon the success of the book. You get more royalties, that's for sure. But it's like, 70% of a grape versus 30% of a watermelon. So,
Yeah.
but is your book a watermelon or a grape? So those are considerations. And that leads me to my next point, which is the realities. And actually, one other thing about pitfalls is scams. For whatever reason, I think that scammers prey on creative types, and it's rampant in all sorts of creativity, from movies to music to books, etc. Everything. Artists, obviously, they just really these scammers think that creatives are all wealthy, and easy marks.
Yeah.
But so please, everyone, be careful. If it's has any whiff of something being rotten, it is rotten. Trust me. Trust me. Okay. So that's an unfortunate pitfall. And then there's the realities, which, a major one is time. These projects take a very, very, very long time. It takes a long time to write a first draft. It takes a long time to have a submission ready draft. And if you go the traditional route, you're going to need 2 submission ready drafts, one for your agent to submit to publishers. Now, hopefully it's the same, but more often than not, your agent might ask for revisions. That takes time. It takes an extremely long time to send out query letters and get an agent. It takes an extremely long time for agents then to go out on submission with your work. And then it takes an extremely long time for publishers to publish your work. So, realistically speaking, even if you have a submission ready draft to go today and you go the traditional route and everything hits, your book probably would not be on shelves for another 2 years. Now, the flip side to that is self-publishing, where the timing is way shorter. You have full control. And I'm not being a proponent for either one. These are just the realisms. But so it's shorter, you have more control. Like I said, you're going to get a bigger piece of the pie. Now, how big that pie is another story. But you also have way more work to do. Okay. So you and I had this conversation before, and I teach workshops about this. And one of my number one takeaway is that this is a business. Whether you
I have it
self-publish,
tattooed on the inside of my head.
yes, the same. Um, whether you self-publish or go to the traditional route, this is a business. Now, the traditional route, yes, you are going to have other people working with you in this business for sure, but it's still a business and you still have your role to play. It's not just like, unless you're Stephen King or James Patterson or somebody like that, where you can just push it aside. But even they still do things to support the business. Don't forget, even the biggest authors in the world still do things, and they also did a ton to get there. So a lot of people have this attitude of like, if I build it, they will come. And I'm sorry, but like that just, and then they get upset. How come people aren't buying my book? I only sold 3 copies to my mom and dad. Like it's, these are the
Oh, it's
realities of the
so
situation.
painfully true, Rob. It really
Right.
is.
So people need to wear 2 different hats. You need to have your creative hat, and then you need to have your business hat. It's really important.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate that I have a lot of experience in business and sales and marketing, so I can apply that to the writing business. But even then, it's hard. There is so much to do. You
Mm,
have to think of it as you are opening a store. You are selling a product, and ideally you want to have more than one product in that store, and you want to
mm,
attract your customers into that store. You need to continue advertising. You need to continue getting your customers, and on and on and on and on and on. And at the same time, you need to continue building your inventory. And the only way to do that is then at night, put on, or whenever you put on your creative hat and you start working on your inventory. So a
yeah.
reality is, once your ship has been built, then your real journey begins once that ship launches. And a lot of people don't really kind of think about that. They're like, okay, I'm working on my book. I'm writing my book. I know I need to query the agents and blah, 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 blah. But the real work, honestly, does not even begin until your release date and the lead up to it, I guess.
For sure. And of course, the other thing is that whilst you're running the business of your book and you're writing the next book, a lot of us are also doing a day job or managing their family or looking after elderly relatives or any number of other
Or
responsibilities,
all of the above.
all of the above. And we don't necessarily make enough money to buy that beautiful house in the mountains and a yacht to go with it. So it's not about the money. So the question that I ask myself and everybody all the time is, why do we do it? What is the compulsion?
Yeah, I think that is a beautiful way to circle all the way back to the beginning, which is that, I mean, for me, and I think for most of us who are writers or storytellers, and I think of myself more of a storyteller than a writer, and it's just this ingrained it's like a need. It's a need, I think, to tell stories. Like, I think I would explode if I didn't actually get them out. I do have these conversations with my wife about it because I spend an inordinate amount of time, nights and weekends, writing when I could be doing other things. And even if it's after the kids going to sleep, a lot of times, like, I'd rather just kick back and watch a movie. But I spend all this time writing, and for me, I do enjoy it. It is even though there's a lot of stress that goes around it. In fact, I'm going to digress in a second about that stress because I think this will be an interesting topic for you and the readers. But there is a lot of stress around it, but there's also a lot of enjoyment. I enjoy every single aspect of it. I know a lot of people hate editing, or they hate outlining, or they hate writing a synopsis or whatever. I do indeed enjoy those things, because it's like you're building this, you're creating this thing, right? And to me, it's just sort of fun. I actually, it's like working on the books is a way for me to kind of like check out from everything else. I get
Mm,
so in the zone of this other world, and I'm transported to 1614 Venice, and it's like I'm
yeah.
not dealing with anything of the modern day. So that's how I deal with it. I do enjoy it. Now, switching quickly over to the whole stress thing, because I think this is important. 5 minutes before this podcast started, I received, and I think I can say this publicly, but I received an email from the Authors Guild. The Authors Guild is the largest and oldest association for professional writers, which I am a member of. I'm also an ambassador for the Denver chapter. And the Authors Guild has been helping me and I think about like 15 to 20 other authors dealing with our former publisher, who used to be like one of the largest mid-sized publishers, but went belly up, and to this day owes all of us a lot of money. And this is another pitfall, actually. So my agent helped secure a 3-book deal with a company that was owned by a woman. And when I got this deal, it seemed great. I was overjoyed. Like, this is cool. They were one of the biggest independent publishers, and 3-book deal, right? Like, pretty cool. Um, but probably about a year in, maybe a little less, I started seeing a lot of red flags. And then those red flags started to accumulate, and not just for me, but for all the other authors. And, we were talking to each other. And long story short, she basically took our money. I'm not
Mm,
going to beat around the bush. And yeah, this is public. So this brings me back to my point, which is that right before this call, I received a report through one of the major platforms, where she claimed that sales were far lower than they were. And
mm.
I always suspected that I knew that they were higher. And it turns out that they're actually way higher than I thought. And that's just one platform. Be careful. Again, if there's any scent of something being rotten, it probably is. Look into it. We all have this temptation. And quite frankly, I probably would have taken the deal again, if I were to do it over again, because, you only know what you know. But even if I knew something from the future, good things have come out of it. I made a ton of friends with the other authors. I've learned a ton. Um, and it's unfortunate, but um, it is what it is. And ultimately, the rights I did get the rights back, and now they've been republished through a different publisher. But this is one of those pitfalls. There's a lot of, you're walking through the jungle, and there's quicksand and snakes and spiders.
That's a really important cautionary tale. And I'm really glad you shared it, because there could be people listening who find themselves in situations where they have a nagging doubt. And if they
Hmm.
do, they should certainly explore that and make sure that they are protecting themselves. And
It's
I
a
hope you get
great,
the
yeah.
resolution you deserve.
Thank you. And Bronte, it's a great way of putting it, is nagging doubt. If you have a
Mm,
nagging doubt, look into what that doubt is.
yeah,
Maybe it's fine, but I would look into it. Yeah.
thank you. One last sensible question, and then I'm going to give you a quick 10 in 10 to bring us to the close of our conversation. My last question is the same every time, and it's this. What does success as an author mean to you now, and has it changed?
That's another great question, Bronte. And I think it has changed a little bit. So, you talked about like getting the call from Netflix and the option your work, and, it's made for the screen and all that. obviously I still have that dream. And I think at one point, especially since I did adapt the script into novel form, that was sort of my measure of success. I've dialed it back considerably, and I think I I would actually classify myself as successful for what I've done. However, I have not achieved the level of success that I want. And what I want for that is to be able to um, support my family solely on um, book writing, or not necessarily book on just say let's just say writing. Period. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I hope for that
Not that
for
I,
you.
yeah, and I do love my day job, especially if anybody out there is listening to it. Is an important. I do important
It's
work, and
probably
I do.
not something that they don't already know about you anyway. I'm sure that anybody
Yeah,
that knows you knows of
that's
your love for the written word.
right.
I'm quite sure. Thank you. And success does mean different things to different people. And I often say that I thought I was the height of success when I held my first physical book in my hand because I'd actually managed to finish
Right.
it, edit it, and have it produced as a novel. And I think I am a low-hanging fruit, incremental steps kind of motivated person. So I have to give myself short-term goals to achieve. Otherwise,
Yeah,
I can't stay motivated to do anything. So little and
absolutely.
often.
Yeah, absolutely, Bronte. I think there's milestones of success, and people should celebrate those. Finishing your
Mm.
first draft is huge. Getting your book in your hands is huge. Getting your one sale is huge. There's all these different little milestones of success, and people should take the time to celebrate those. If you
They
have a
should,
favorite
shouldn't
drink,
they?
yeah, absolutely. If you have a favorite drink, celebrate and drink it.
That's
Take a moment.
exactly where my brain immediately went. I was thinking, oh my God, this is a great opportunity. I'm going to put a bottle of champagne in the fridge that I'm going to open when I achieve every milestone. I just have to be careful that that's not writing 100 words or finishing a
Right.
chapter, because I could easily go there. But yes, I think it's really
Right.
important to have goals that you feel are achievable, and then to celebrate them in whatever form that might be. It might be a candy bar, as you call it over there, or a bar of chocolate, as we would describe it here. Whatever it is, brilliant, fantastic
I have a
advice.
question for you, actually. I've been to England many times, and in fact, I was actually there not that long ago, and my brother lives there. But I am curious, because I don't know this. What do you call a candy bar that's not chocolate?
Well, then it would probably be a sweet.
That's sweet.
A sweet.
Okay.
Yeah. If it was like a bar of, I don't know, chewy stuff that was flavoured like fruit, we'd probably call it a sweet. So
Okay.
we have cereal bars, muesli bars, health food bars,
Right.
protein bars,
Yeah.
chocolate bars.
Lots of bars
We have
and pubs. Yeah.
biscuit bars.
Good
We have
biscuit.
bars of all sorts. Bars where you can buy drinks, all sorts of. We like a bar. That's one of the things that we like.
You're making me hungry. Yeah.
I'd love to finish our conversation with my 10 in 10. Let's do it. So my first, as a reader, when you're reading, do you prefer your books sweet or spicy?
Spicy.
Fact-based or pure fiction?
Either. I'm fine with either.
You can have that. I'm quite lenient about these things. Cliffhanger or happy ever after?
Cliffhanger, as long as it's resolved in something in the future. Now the flip side to that is I hate an unresolved cliffhanger.
Okay, so we can dangle you tentatively, but don't leave you dangling completely.
Yeah, I don't want to fall off that cliff.
No. E-book or physical book?
Both, but honestly, I find ebooks way easier on my eyes. So I do read more ebooks because of that. It's just easier for me to see. My old
They're also
age.
easier to cart around when you're travelling, aren't they?
That's true.
Dog-eared or pristine, if we're thinking physical?
Honestly, I'm more of a pristine. I preserve the books. I try not even to bend the pages of my own books.
Honour the book. Honour
Yeah.
it. Bedtime reading or anytime reading?
in a perfect world, anytime reading. In my world, bedtime is the only time. Yeah.
That's where I am right now. What with podcasting, running a business, writing a book, there's no time. One at a time or multiple choice?
I am always listening to a book and also reading a book, so always multiple.
And the last one, bookmark or fold the corner?
Bookmark.
Well, I would hope so too if you're keeping those books pristine. Rob Samborn, it has been every inch the pleasure I knew it would be to spend this time talking to you. Thank you so much for teaching us a little bit more about you, the man behind the book cover, the stories between the book covers, and sharing your wisdom and insight with us in this podcast. Wish you the very best of luck with the future of your career as a writer and as an author, and with the sales of your books. And those of you who are listening in and thinking, I need to read those books, you will find information that will help you to find both Rob and all of the stories that he has written for your delectation and delight in the bio that accompanies this podcast. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone. And it's goodbye from Mrs. Wright.
Thank you so much, Bronte. It's been an absolute pleasure and a joy speaking with you. I hope that one day we can do this in person, whether it's on this side or the other side of the pond. But yes, thank you so much for having me on your show. This has been an amazing conversation and hope to do it again.
Thank you, and yay to the idea of doing something in person. Love that. Take very good care, and goodbye for now.
Tap, 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 she's lining up a scene. Coffee cup, cat's tail, dancing in the steam. Every little click spins a brand new theme. Mrs. Wright, that's right.